Jake Morrison stood at the command center of Luna Base and watched the red warning lights flash across every screen. The message had arrived 3 hours ago, and he still could not believe what he was reading. 22 years of careful peace, with the Zephyrians, was about to end, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The tall, crystalline beings had first appeared when humanity made its breakthrough into faster-than-light travel. Earth had been so proud of that moment when the research ship Endeavour had jumped beyond the solar system for the first time. The celebration lasted exactly 47 minutes before the alien ships appeared around Earth like ghosts materializing from nothing. The Zephyrians were beautiful in a cold way that made humans feel small and primitive. They stood nearly 9 feet tall with bodies that looked like living crystal formations. Their faces had no features that humans could understand, but somehow they could speak directly into human minds without moving or making any sound. That first conversation had been terrifying. The alien ambassador had appeared in the United Nations, building in New York, and had spoken to every person on Earth at the same time. Its mental voice was like ice water flowing through human brains, and the message was simple. Humanity had violated the boundaries of civilized space and would now be placed under protective observation until they could prove they deserved to join the galactic community. Earth had no choice but to accept. The Zephyrian ships could destroy every city on the planet in minutes, and their technology was so far beyond human understanding that resistance seemed impossible. So humanity agreed to stay within their solar system and allow the aliens to monitor their progress toward what the Zephyrians called proper civilization. Jake had been a young officer then, and had watched his government make deals with beings who saw humans as dangerous children. The aliens built monitoring stations on the Moon and Mars and Jupiter. They studied human behavior and technology and culture like scientists examining bacteria in a laboratory. Sometimes they would take humans for questioning, and those people would return days later with gaps in their memory and strange marks on their skin. Dr. Lisa Carter had been one of those taken 15 years ago. She had been Earth's leading expert on alien technology, and the Zephyrians had been very interested in her work. When she returned, she was different. She spoke less and worked more, and sometimes Jake would catch her staring at the sky with an expression he could not read. She had become the director of xenological research, and her reports to the government were always carefully neutral. Now Jake looked at the latest message from the Zephyrian High Command and felt his hands shake with anger. The protective observation period was ending, and humanity had failed to meet the standards required for independence. Earth had 30 days to submit to full integration into the Zephyrian collective or face what they called corrective measures. Integration meant the end of human individuality. Every person on Earth would have their mind connected to the vast network of Zephyrian consciousness. They would think as one being and act as one being, and humanity as a separate species would cease to exist. The aliens called it evolution and claimed it would bring peace and order to human civilization. Captain Ryan Brooks contacted Jake from his position in the asteroid belt, where he commanded the experimental ship New Horizon. The vessel was officially a mining platform, but Jake knew better. For 10 years, a secret group of military leaders had been preparing for this day. They had built weapons in hidden facilities and trained soldiers in techniques the aliens had never seen. The New Horizon was their most advanced warship, and it had been carefully hidden from Zephyrian sensors. Ryan reported that similar ships were positioned throughout the outer solar system. Underground bases on Mars and Europa were ready to support extended operations. Weapons that could penetrate alien shields had been tested and proven effective. The resistance was small, but it was real, and it was ready to fight. Jake thought about his daughter, who was starting school next week, and his wife, who was a doctor in Chicago. He thought about every human who had ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of exploring them freely. The Zephyrians offered safety and order, but the price was everything that made humans human. Dr. Carter appeared in the command center, and her face was grim. She had been analyzing the integration process, and her conclusions were terrifying. The Zephyrians did not just want to control human minds, they wanted to erase human culture and replace it with their own perfect system. Art and music and literature would disappear. Love and friendship and family would become meaningless concepts in a world where everyone thought the same thoughts. General Patricia Hayes arrived from Earth with orders from the Global Defense Council. The decision had been made, and it was unanimous. Humanity would not submit to integration, and they would not surrender their freedom. Earth was going to fight back, and they would either win their independence or die trying. Jake looked at the countdown timer, showing 29 days and 16 hours until the deadline. The Zephyrians expected humanity to kneel and accept their fate. Instead, they were about to discover that humans could be far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The Zephyrian scout ships moved into position around Earth like predators circling wounded prey. Their crystalline hulls reflected sunlight in patterns that hurt human eyes to watch, and their presence made the air itself feel heavy with menace. Admiral Kethavar commanded the observation fleet from his flagship and felt confident that the primitive humans would submit within days. The aliens had studied humanity for over 2 decades and had concluded that they were a species driven by fear and self-preservation. When faced with overwhelming force, humans had always chosen survival over pride. The Zephyrians expected this situation to follow the same pattern and had already begun preparing the integration facilities that would process billions of human minds into their collective consciousness. Captain Nicole Davis worked in a facility buried 3 miles beneath the Sahara Desert that officially did not exist. The complex had been built using mining equipment that had mysteriously disappeared from corporate inventories over the past decade. The workers who had constructed it believed they were building a geological research station, and none of them knew about the laboratories hidden in the deepest levels. Nicole had been reverse engineering Zephyrian technology since the first alien ship had crashed in the Pacific Ocean 8 years ago. The incident had been covered up as a meteor impact, but recovery teams had salvaged enough alien materials to begin serious research. What they discovered changed everything humanity thought they knew about the invaders. The Zephyrians were not as invincible as they appeared. Their energy shields could be penetrated by weapons that generated specific electromagnetic frequencies. Their sensors could be blinded by carefully tuned interference patterns. Most importantly, their collective consciousness was vulnerable to certain types of psychic static that human minds could generate naturally. Bobby Chen had been working with Nicole for 3 years and understood the practical applications of their discoveries better than anyone. He had spent 15 years mining asteroids and had developed an intuitive understanding of how alien technology actually functioned. Where the scientists saw complex equations, Bobby saw simple mechanical relationships that could be exploited. The team had developed 3 prototype weapons that could damage Zephyrian ships. The first was a particle beam that could disrupt their energy shields long enough for conventional weapons to penetrate. The second was an electromagnetic pulse generator that could blind their sensors and communications. The third was the most dangerous and most important. It was a device that could amplify human brainwaves and broadcast them directly into the Zephyrian collective network. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Martinez ran training programs for Special Forces units at bases hidden throughout the solar system. His job was to teach human soldiers how to fight an enemy that could read minds and predict human behavior with frightening accuracy. The solution was to embrace the chaos and unpredictability that the aliens found so disturbing. Tony had discovered that Zephyrian telepathy worked by detecting patterns in human thought processes. When humans acted according to logical plans, or followed standard military doctrine, the aliens could anticipate their moves easily. But when humans acted on impulse or emotion or pure instinct, the collective consciousness struggled to process the information quickly enough to respond effectively. The training programs taught soldiers to think in multiple directions at once. They learned to plan 3 different attacks simultaneously while singing childhood songs in their heads and remembering random memories from their past. The mental static this created was enough to confuse Zephyrian telepaths and give human forces crucial seconds of advantage in combat. Dr. Amy Rodriguez made the breakthrough that changed everything when she realized that humanity's greatest weakness was actually their greatest strength. The Zephyrians saw human diversity as chaos that needed to be eliminated. 7 billion people speaking thousands of languages and thinking in millions of different ways created a level of mental noise that the collective consciousness could not fully comprehend or control. Amy had been studying brain patterns in volunteers from different cultures and had discovered that each group generated unique types of neural activity. When combined, the patterns created interference that could disrupt Zephyrian telepathy across wide areas. A planet full of diverse humans was like a radio transmitter broadcasting pure chaos directly into the alien network. The resistance cells on Mars reported their first major success when they destroyed a Zephyrian research station near Olympus, Mons. The facility had been studying human prisoners, and the aliens were completely unprepared for the attack. Commander Kate Williams led the assault team and recovered 43 humans who had been missing for months. The rescued prisoners told horrifying stories about the experiments being conducted on human subjects. The Zephyrians had been trying to understand how human consciousness worked so they could design better integration procedures. They had been particularly interested in studying children because young minds were easier to reshape according to alien patterns. Similar attacks succeeded on Europa and Titan, where Zephyrian monitoring stations were destroyed by teams that seemed to appear from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. The aliens began to realize that their surveillance network had been penetrated and that humans had been planning this resistance for much longer than anyone had suspected. Dr. Rodriguez activated her planet-wide broadcast system exactly 18 days before the integration deadline. Every radio telescope and communications satellite on Earth began transmitting amplified human brain waves directly into space, where Zephyrian ships received them like a psychic scream of defiance. The effect was immediate and devastating. Zephyrian crews aboard the observation ships began experiencing something they had not felt in thousands of years. Individual thoughts and emotions started breaking through their collective consciousness. Some aliens became confused and disoriented. Others began questioning orders for the first time in their lives. Admiral Kethvar felt his certainty wavering as chaotic human thoughts invaded his mind. The collective was supposed to provide perfect unity and absolute knowledge. But now he could feel doubt creeping into his consciousness like a virus. The humans were not behaving according to any pattern the Zephyrians could predict, and their resistance was spreading like a disease through the fleet. The 30-day deadline was still 10 days away, but humanity had already begun their war for independence. The Zephyrians had expected submission, and instead they faced an enemy that grew stronger and more dangerous with every passing hour. The deadline arrived like thunder breaking across a clear sky, and humanity gave their answer with weapons instead of words. Admiral Kethvar received the human response at exactly noon Greenwich Mean Time, when every defensive platform around Earth opened fire simultaneously. The attack was coordinated and brutal and completely unexpected. Operation Wildfire began with Captain Ryan Brooks leading the New Horizon in a direct assault on the Zephyrian flagship. The experimental ship had been hiding in the shadow of an asteroid for 6 months, and the aliens had no idea it existed. Brooks brought his vessel screaming out of concealment at maximum acceleration, while Dr. Carter activated the electromagnetic pulse generators they had installed throughout the ship. The pulse hit the Zephyrian flagship like a hammer blow to the brain. Every sensor array went dark, and the collective consciousness link that connected the crew to their home network suddenly went silent. For the first time in millennia, individual Zephyrians found themselves alone with their own thoughts, and the experience was terrifying. Brooks pressed his advantage and fired everything the New Horizon carried directly into the enemy ship's main reactor core. The particle beams tore through energy shields that flickered and failed under the electromagnetic assault. Explosions rippled along the crystalline hull as critical systems overloaded and the flagship began listing toward Earth's atmosphere. But the victory came with a price that Brooks had known he would have to pay. Zephyrian boarding parties materialized inside the New Horizon using teleportation technology that humans barely understood. Brooks fought his way to the bridge as his crew died around him, but there were too many enemies and not enough time. The last transmission from the New Horizon was Brooks ordering his remaining crew to abandon ship while he stayed behind to detonate the reactor. The explosion lit up the sky above North America and took the Zephyrian flagship with it. Brooks had traded his life and his ship for the enemy command vessel, and every human on Earth saw the flash that announced the war had truly begun. Commander Kate Williams struck next with a ground assault on the Zephyrian research facility that had been built inside Olympus Mons on Mars. Her team had been planning this attack for 2 years, and they knew every corridor and security checkpoint in the alien complex. The Zephyrians had never expected humans to assault a fortified position, and their defenses were designed to stop escape attempts, not outside attacks. Kate led 60 volunteers through maintenance tunnels that connected to the human mining operations nearby. They carried weapons that Bobby Chen had designed specifically to penetrate Zephyrian personal shields, and they moved with the desperate fury of people who had seen what the aliens did to human prisoners. The research facility contained hundreds of human subjects, including children who had been taken from their families for experimentation. The Zephyrians had been studying human neural development and had been particularly interested in understanding how human creativity and individuality functioned at the biological level. Kate's team fought through laboratory after laboratory filled with equipment that looked like torture devices designed by beings who viewed humans as experimental animals. They found humans connected to machines that monitored their brain activity, while alien researchers tried to understand the source of human unpredictability. The battle was short and vicious. Zephyrian researchers were not soldiers, and they had no experience fighting enemies who refused to surrender even when facing certain death. Kate's team destroyed every piece of equipment they could find and rescued every human they could carry. The facility was left burning as they retreated through tunnels that collapsed behind them. Dr. Rodriguez achieved the greatest victory when she activated the global transmission network that had been hidden inside Earth's communication infrastructure for over a decade. Every satellite and radio telescope and cellular tower on the planet began broadcasting amplified human consciousness directly into the Zephyrian collective network. The psychic feedback was like poison flooding through the alien command structure. Zephyrians throughout the solar system began experiencing individual emotions and chaotic thoughts that their collective consciousness could not process or control. Some aliens became paralyzed by confusion, while others began questioning their orders and their entire way of life. Admiral Kethvar felt his mind fracturing as human thoughts invaded his consciousness like a virus spreading through a computer network. He could hear individual voices speaking different languages and thinking different thoughts, and the cacophony was driving him towards something the Zephyrians had not experienced in thousands of years. Madness. The collective tried to isolate the infected ships, but the broadcast was too powerful and too widespread. Human consciousness was bleeding into every Zephyrian mind within range of Earth's transmissions, and the effect was spreading through their network like wildfire jumping between trees. But humanity's triumph was brief because the Zephyrians recovered, faster than anyone had expected. The high command on their homeworld began cutting communication links to prevent the psychic contamination from spreading further. Fresh ships began arriving from other sectors with crews that had not been exposed to human mental interference. The retaliation was swift and merciless. Orbital bombardment platforms that had been hidden throughout the solar system revealed themselves and began firing on major population centers. New York and Tokyo and London disappeared in flashes of light that could be seen from space. The Death toll climbed into the millions within hours. Zephyrian ground forces landed in 12 locations and began establishing control zones around the bombardment sites. Their soldiers moved with mechanical precision and showed no mercy to civilians or military personnel. Surrender was not accepted, and resistance was met with immediate execution. General Patricia Hayes coordinated the global defense from a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, while reports flooded in from battle zones around the world. Humanity had wounded the enemy, but they had also revealed the true extent of Zephyrian military power. The aliens had been holding back during the occupation period, and now they were showing what a real war looked like. Jake Morrison received orders to evacuate Luna Base as enemy ships moved to capture the facility. He looked at Earth, hanging in space above him, and saw the lights of burning cities scattered across the night side of the planet. The war humanity had started was going to be far more terrible than anyone had imagined, but there was no turning back now. The Zephyrians had expected submission, and instead they had awakened something in humanity that they did not understand. Earth was burning, but humans were still fighting, and that was something the collective consciousness could not easily process or predict. 6 months into the war, the Earth looked like a broken planet from space. Massive craters marked where Zephyrian orbital strikes had eliminated major cities, and huge areas of the surface glowed with radiation that would take decades to fade. The oceans were filled with the wreckage of human and alien ships, and the sky was crossed with the trails of battles that never seemed to end. Dr. Elena Martinez worked from a laboratory hidden deep in the Amazon rainforest, where the dense canopy provided some protection from orbital surveillance. She had been studying captured Zephyrian communication equipment when she detected something impossible. There were aliens sending messages that contradicted the collective consciousness and seemed to contain individual thoughts and opinions. The discovery led to the most important breakthrough of the war when Elena made contact with a group of Zephyrian dissidents who called themselves the Broken Chain. These aliens had been infected by human consciousness during the early psychic broadcasts and had begun to question their species' hive mind philosophy for the first time in their lives. The leader of the dissidents chose the human name Gabriel and communicated through painful telepathic contact that made Elena's head feel like it was splitting open. Gabriel explained that many Zephyrians had been secretly fascinated by human individuality for years, but had suppressed these thoughts because they contradicted collective doctrine. The human resistance had given these dissidents hope that alternatives to the hive mind were possible. They had been working to spread doubt and confusion through the Zephyrian network, while providing intelligence about enemy military operations to human forces whenever possible. Gabriel's faction revealed that the Zephyrian collective was not as unified as it appeared to outside observers. There were different philosophical schools within their society, and some groups had been questioning the wisdom of forced integration for decades. The war with humanity had brought these disagreements into the open for the first time. Captain Lisa Park commanded a combined human-alien force that included 3 captured Zephyrian ships crewed by defectors from Gabriel's faction. The Hybrid fleet operated from bases hidden in the asteroid belt and conducted hit-and-run attacks on enemy supply lines throughout the outer solar system. The cooperation between humans and rebel Zephyrians created tactical possibilities that neither species could achieve alone. Human unpredictability combined with alien technology produced strategies that confused and frustrated the collective consciousness. Enemy commanders found themselves fighting battles that followed no logical pattern and produced results that their strategic computers could not predict. Sergeant Mike Foster led a guerrilla unit in the ruins of Chicago, where Zephyrian occupation forces had established a major control center. His team had learned to move through the destroyed city like ghosts, using tunnels and sewers that the aliens did not know existed. They struck at enemy patrols and supply convoys before vanishing into hiding places that had been prepared years in advance. Mike's success came from understanding that Zephyrians thought in patterns that could be disrupted by deliberately chaotic behavior. His team would plan attacks using random number generators and would change their objectives multiple times during operations. The aliens could read human minds, but they could not predict decisions that humans had not made yet. The guerrilla tactics spread to resistance movements around the world as human fighters learned to exploit the weaknesses in Zephyrian strategic thinking. Enemy forces found themselves fighting in war that had no front lines and no clear objectives. Every human civilian was a potential combatant, and every building could hide weapons and supplies. Dr. Amy Rodriguez made another breakthrough when she discovered that prolonged exposure to human consciousness was causing permanent changes in Zephyrian brain structure. Aliens who had been infected with individual thoughts were developing neural pathways that allowed independent thinking even when connected to the collective network. The changes were irreversible, and they were spreading through the enemy population like a contagious disease. Zephyrians who had been exposed to human broadcasts were passing the infection to others through normal telepathic contact. The collective consciousness was slowly breaking down as more and more individuals began thinking for themselves. Admiral Kethavar had been one of the first to be infected, and he now commanded a secret faction within the Zephyrian military that was working to end the war through negotiation rather than conquest. He had begun to understand that destroying humanity would eliminate the only force in the galaxy capable of teaching other species about the value of individual consciousness. The war had evolved into something that neither side had expected or wanted. Humans were fighting for their survival, while Zephyrians were fighting for their identity. The conflict had revealed fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness and free will that both species were struggling to answer. Elena received a message from Gabriel that changed everything. The rebel Zephyrians had discovered the location of their species' central collective node on their homeworld. The facility contained the master consciousness that controlled every Zephyrian in the galaxy, and it was vulnerable to the same type of psychic warfare that had been so effective in the solar system. Gabriel proposed a joint mission that would plant human consciousness directly into the collective network and give every Zephyrian the choice between hive mind unity and individual freedom. The operation would be incredibly dangerous and would require human volunteers to travel to the enemy homeworld with no guarantee of survival or escape. Jake Morrison volunteered to lead the mission before anyone else could speak. He had lost his wife and daughter in the bombardment of Chicago and had nothing left to lose except his species' future. The plan was desperate and probably suicidal, but it offered something that military victory could not provide. It offered the chance to end the war by transforming the enemy rather than destroying them. The mission would require the best ships and the best crews that humanity could provide. It would also require Zephyrian rebels to guide them through enemy territory and help them reach their target. Success would mean freedom for both species, while failure would mean the extinction of everything that made humans human. 1 year after the ultimatum, Admiral Susan Clark commanded the rebuilt Earth fleet from the bridge of a captured Zephyrian dreadnought that had been renamed Liberation. The massive ship had been taken during a battle near Jupiter when its crew defected to Gabriel's rebel faction and turned their weapons on their former allies. The victory had given humanity its first capital ship capable of matching enemy firepower. Susan looked at the tactical displays showing enemy positions throughout the solar system and felt a mixture of pride and dread. Human forces had pushed the Zephyrian occupation back to the outer planets, but intelligence reports indicated that a massive armada was approaching from the alien homeworld. The fleet that was coming would be larger than anything humanity had faced, and it would arrive within weeks. Dr. Carter worked in laboratories aboard the Liberation with a team of human scientists and Zephyrian defectors who were developing the final version of what they called the Liberation virus. The weapon was designed to permanently sever individual aliens from their collective consciousness while leaving them alive and capable of independent thought. The virus was controversial. even among humans, because it would essentially destroy Zephyrian civilization as it had existed for thousands of years. Some argued that forcing individuality on beings who had chosen collective unity was just as wrong as forcing humans to join the hive mind. Others believed that the collective itself was a form of slavery that had imprisoned an entire species. For millennia, Gabriel had provided crucial information about Zephyrian neural architecture that made the virus possible. The rebel leader explained that most of his people had been born into the collective and had never experienced individual consciousness. They did not know what they were missing because they had never been allowed to think for themselves. Jake. Morrison prepared for the most dangerous mission in human history as he studied star charts showing the route to the Zephyrian homeworld. His strike team included the best pilots and soldiers that Earth could provide, along with Zephyrian rebels who would guide them through enemy territory. The ships they would use were hybrids combining human and alien technology that had never been tested in deep space. The mission had 3 objectives that all depended on reaching the collective node on the enemy homeworld. First, they would plant the Liberation virus directly into the Central Consciousness Network. Second, they would broadcast human neural patterns to every Zephyrian in the galaxy simultaneously. Third, they would provide the alien population with a choice between collective unity and individual freedom. Captain Morrison knew the mission was probably suicide, but he also knew it was humanity's only chance to end the war without destroying both species. Military victory was becoming impossible, as more enemy ships arrived from other sectors of the galaxy. The only way to stop the fighting was to change the nature of the enemy itself. The strike force departed from a hidden base in the Kuiper Belt, while Admiral Clark prepared to face the approaching armada with everything humanity had left. The 2 operations would happen simultaneously, and both would need to succeed for either to have meaning. If Morrison failed to reach the collective node, then Clark's fleet would be destroyed. If Clark failed to hold the enemy armada, then Morrison's team would be trapped on the homeworld with no way to return. The journey to the Zephyrian homeworld took 6 weeks using captured alien navigation technology and rebel guides who knew the routes through enemy space. Morrison watched stars he had never seen before and wondered if any human would ever see Earth again. The ships moved through alien territory like ghosts, using stealth systems that Gabriel's faction had provided. The Zephyrian homeworld was a crystalline sphere that hung in space like a massive jewel, reflecting the light of twin suns. The planet was covered with structures that looked like living crystal formations, and the collective node was located at the center of the largest city. Morrison could see ships moving in orbital patterns around the world, and knew that penetrating the defenses would require everything his team had learned about alien technology. The enemy armada reached the solar system while Morrison was still approaching the homeworld, and Admiral Clark found herself facing a fleet that contained over 300 ships of various sizes. The battle began at the orbit of Saturn, where human forces had prepared their main defensive line using asteroid fortifications and captured alien weapons. Captain Davis led a squadron of hybrid ships that used art and music broadcasts to confuse enemy targeting systems while attacking with weapons that generated chaotic electromagnetic patterns. The tactics worked because Zephyrian collective consciousness could not process completely random information quickly enough to mount effective responses. The space battle was unlike anything that had ever been fought as human creativity clashed with alien efficiency in a conflict that spanned millions of cubic kilometers. Ships danced between moons and planets while firing weapons that bent space and time. The Liberation fought alongside captured enemy vessels crewed by rebels who had chosen freedom over unity. Morrison's team reached the surface of the homeworld and began fighting their way through crystal cities that looked like they had been grown rather than built. Zephyrian defenders moved with perfect coordination, but they were unprepared for enemies who attacked in patterns that followed no logical structure. The collective node was housed in a tower that stretched from the planet's surface to low orbit. and was defended by security systems that had never been tested against outside attack. Morrison led his team through corridors filled with alien technology, while Gabriel's rebels provided guidance and disabled defensive measures. The node itself was a chamber filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with energy patterns that hurt human eyes to watch. Morrison could feel the presence of billions of alien minds connected through the network, and realized he was looking at the heart of an entire civilization. The liberation virus would either free these beings or destroy them, and there was no way to know which until it was too late to change course. Dr. Carter activated the transmission system while Jake Morrison prepared to upload human consciousness into an alien network that had controlled an entire species for longer than humanity had existed. The war that had begun with an ultimatum was about to end with the transformation of everything both species believed about the nature of consciousness and freedom. The final battle erupted simultaneously across space and on the surface of the Zephyrian homeworld, as both species fought for the right to determine their own destiny. Admiral Clark watched her fleet engage the enemy armada in a desperate struggle around Jupiter, while Jake Morrison prepared to upload human consciousness into the alien collective network on a planet billions of kilometers away. The space battle had evolved beyond anything military strategists had ever imagined as human ships, used tactics that combined advanced technology with pure instinct and creativity. Captain Davis commanded a squadron that painted geometric patterns in space with their engine trails while broadcasting classical music directly into enemy communication networks. The combination of visual and auditory chaos disrupted Zephyrian coordination systems and created openings for more conventional attacks. The Liberation fought alongside ships crewed by Zephyrian rebels who had learned to think as individuals while retaining their advanced technical knowledge. These hybrid crews created tactical possibilities that neither species could achieve alone, and their success proved that cooperation between humans and aliens was not only possible, but potentially superior to either approach used separately. Morrison reached the central chamber of the collective node and found himself standing before a crystalline structure that pulsed with the combined consciousness of trillions of beings. Gabriel stood beside him and explained that the network contained not just living Zephyrians, but the stored memories and personalities of every member of their species who had ever existed. The collective consciousness was not just a communication system, but a form of technological immortality that had preserved Zephyrian civilization for hundreds of thousands of years. Destroying it would eliminate the accumulated knowledge and wisdom of an ancient species, while liberating it would give every individual the choice between unity and independence. Dr. Carter activated the liberation virus, while Morrison began uploading human neural patterns into the alien network. The process was designed to give every Zephyrian access to human memories and emotions and creativity, while providing them with the mental tools necessary to think as individuals if they chose to do so. The effect was immediate and profound as billions of alien minds suddenly experienced human consciousness for the first time. They felt emotions like love and fear and hope that had been suppressed by the collective for millennia. They experienced individual memories and dreams and ambitions that belonged to humans they had never met, but now understood completely. Some Zephyrians embraced the chaos and freedom of individual thought, while others retreated deeper into the collective network seeking the comfort of unity and shared consciousness. The species split into two groups with roughly equal numbers choosing each path, and the result was not destruction but transformation. Admiral Kethvar commanded the moderate faction within the enemy armada and used his influence to convince other ship commanders to cease hostilities while the transformation spread through their crews. The battle around Jupiter gradually ended as more and more Zephyrian vessels stopped fighting and began negotiating with human forces. The war ended not with total victory for either side, but with the emergence of a new type of civilization that combined the best aspects of both human and alien culture. Zephyrians who chose individuality began exploring concepts like art and music and literature, while those who remained in the collective provided stability and technological advancement for the growing interstellar community. Morrison found himself appointed as the first human ambassador to the new Zephyrian Republic, while Gabriel became the leader of the individualist faction among his people. The two species began working together to establish colonies where collective consciousness and individual freedom could coexist and complement each other. Dr. Rodriguez discovered that the transformation had effects beyond just Zephyrian society, as human consciousness had been changed by exposure to alien telepathic networks. Some humans developed limited telepathic abilities, while others gained enhanced problem-solving skills that combined logical analysis with intuitive leaps. The galaxy that had once been dominated by the rigid conformity of the collective consciousness became a place where diversity of thought and culture were celebrated as essential components of a healthy civilization. New species who had been suppressed by Zephyrian expansion began emerging from hiding and joining the growing community of free worlds. Admiral Clark found herself commanding a combined fleet of human and Zephyrian vessels that explored regions of space that had been forbidden territory for thousands of years. The discoveries they made revealed ancient civilizations and lost technologies that had been hidden by the collective's desire for order and control. The war that had begun with an ultimatum to surrender human nature had ended with the transformation of an entire galaxy's understanding of consciousness and freedom. Earth's decision to fight back had not just saved humanity, but had liberated countless other species who had been waiting for someone to show them that alternatives to forced unity were possible. Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Diplomatic station that orbited the Zephyrian homeworld and watched ships from dozens of different species arriving for the first Galactic Council meeting. The station itself was a hybrid of human and alien architecture that somehow managed to be both functional and beautiful in ways that neither species could have achieved alone. The victory had come at a terrible cost, as billions had died during the war and entire worlds had been devastated by the fighting. But the survivors had built something new and unprecedented in galactic history. They had created a civilization based on choice rather than compulsion and freedom rather than control. Gabriel joined Morrison at the observation window, and the two former enemies watched the future taking shape before their eyes. The Zephyrian had learned to experience individual emotions, while Morrison had gained a deeper understanding of the value of cooperation and unity. Both species had been changed by their contact with each other, and both had become something greater than they had been before. The war was over, but the real work was just beginning as two species learned to build a galaxy where every sentient being could choose their own path through life. Earth had decided to fight back, and in doing so had transformed not just their own destiny, but the fate of every thinking being in the universe.